Hey everyone, it's the Eclectic Dev. Today we're going to look at setting up and configuring Sass in our Blazor applications. Let's check it out. All right, what I have here is a bare bones Blazor standalone web application, but it doesn't really matter which walk of life or what template of Blazor that you're coming from, whether you're doing mobile or web or what type of Blazor application, because if you're going to create a first class implementation making Blazor components, you're going to need a preprocessor like Sass or less. Today we're going to be looking at Sass. Now Blazor out of the box inherently doesn't support this. If you can see in this application, and you might already be using it, it's just plain style files or CSS files like we have right here. So we need to look at some of the options from the open source community that are available to us that we can then use in our Blazor application. Let's take a look at some of those. All right, so I've compiled a list of options shown here on the screen that are really into two buckets when we look at it. We've got JavaScript solutions or .NET NuGet solutions for implementing Sass in our Blazor application. Now, we want to try to stay in the ecosystem of C# and .NET, so we would opt for a NuGet package in this situation. So to filter these out, I've tried several of these before. Some of you may have remembered if you've done MVC development in the past, things like Web Optimizer, but those depend on middleware. So we're looking for a purely NuGet, .NET solution that's going to allow us to transpile our Sass into the CSS and be seamless. Now, along with being seamless, that zero config column, the idea here is that when you add a Sass file, you don't want to have to make a manual entry in some configuration file. You just want to add the file, have it be transpiled, and be seamless with your builds. So putting all that together, the best solution I've found at this time is Dart Sass Builder, which is a NuGet package that is up to date. I have that note there. It used to require the .NET 6 SDK, which was an additional package that was semi-undesired if you were running .NET 8, but it has since been updated. So it does target .NET 8, and that's what we'll use. Let's take a look at getting that set up. All right, so here's Dart Sass Builder, and we can see that there have been over 1 million downloads. So this isn't a niche package. It's well supported and it's been around for a while. So you always want to look at that metadata to see if it's something in the open source community that's worth adopting. Now, these might change over time. I think the big picture here today is to understand you need one of these tools to get set up, but the process across many of them is quite similar. You can add it through the CLI, and then there is the documentation on it. We'll take a look at it, but essentially the options are within the project file itself, so we can take a look and see the different output styles. Is it verbose and the message level, and is when it's debug mode expanded versus compressed for production. There's several different things that you can do here, but in general, it's not overwhelming any of the configuration. In fact, out of the box, it's pretty much ready to go. And as well, if you look at the source on it, the repo itself, this is where you'll get the direct information that talks about .NET is being targeted now, so this package is up to date. Keep an eye on that, because when .NET 9 comes out or future versions, if this thing continues to be behind, you need to take note that whether it's this package or another one, depending on which version of the .NET framework that they're targeting, that's probably the greatest nuance of using any of these. Let's go ahead and add it into our Blazor application. So in my project, as I mentioned, you can use the .NET CLI to issue that command, copy it directly from NuGet if you'd like to. I'm just going to use the option to go into the dialog. So we'll manage NuGet packages, find that package, and install it into our application. So I'm going to go ahead and browse on NuGet.org for Dart Sass Builder. And here is the one that we just looked at, which is version 110. So I'll go ahead and install that into my application. All right, so that's gone ahead and finished installing. We're now ready to use it. So taking a look at some of our components, we have this home razor component by default. It has this header 1 tag with a class called primary message, which is now in the CSS file. So to use the proper naming standard to get our Sass file to show up, we can just add a new file and it will show in the hierarchy as we expect. So what we'll do is say home then you use the dot razor, but now you use the extension SCSS, or in this case, we are using the Sassy CSS syntax version of it. So when we add that in, notice where it ultimately gets put in the hierarchy. It will be here, and the CSS is nested underneath it. Let's go ahead. Now, from the beginning, we can just take what we have, put it into our Sass file, and actually, because this is valid Sass as well, it's a superset, this is going to work. But let's go ahead and just show how we can use a little bit of the Sass functionality and feature and then prove that this all works together. All right, so let's go ahead and introduce a variable here. Let's call this green header, and we will add in the color code that we originally were using. And the idea here is for reuse. So this variable can be reused anywhere without having to repeat that hard-coded value over and over again. So now that we have some Sass in place, some Sass syntax, I want to show you as well to prove that this is working. This Sass file that exists, I'm going to go ahead and delete this CSS file. Now you don't need to do this. I'm just proving that it will get regenerated. So I'm going to go ahead and build the application. You will also notice in the output that Sass compile files is happening, and it has compiled those files. If you look over here now, you will see back in the tree that the CSS file has been generated. It is transpiled from Sass to CSS. And if we go over there, there you go. We have the optimized CSS put right here under our Sass file. So indeed it's working. Then everything in Blazor falls into place. So for example, if I was to go to the index.html file, it always includes the component style sheet. So what it's doing is when you build a Blazor application, all the CSS files from the different components are wrapped up into this Blazor Sass. Oh, in that case, it's the name of the project, .styles.css. All of that falls into place. You don't need any custom actions or hooks to take the CSS that you built from Dart Sass Builder and then incorporate it into Blazor. That's the beautiful thing about this particular NuGet package and the way I like it, because I didn't have to add anything to configuration. All I did is add my Sass file. When it built, it was able to then generate the appropriate CSS file, which Blazor is looking for anyway, and all of those get added into my project. Let's go ahead and run it and take a look and see if our changes took to prove that the file is working. All right, our basic Blazor application is up, and we can see here that we have the bolded green header1 tag right here. If we were to inspect this, you can go ahead and see that this class, our primary message, with that green has been applied. And not only that, the unique selector for CSS isolation that's a part of Blazor, all of that's still intact. Nothing has changed. We've just leveraged Sass in order to build our CSS and all the power that Sass has to offer us with its more robust syntax. All right, one last thing I want to look at before we wrap it up over in the code. All right, so I'm back in the code and it's still running. If you have a question about hot reload, or if you make changes to the Sass file, will it take place while you're debugging? And unfortunately it won't, because the changes only take place when you save or build while before the application is running. If you make a change while it's running, like here, I change it to some random blue color. But if I look at the corresponding Sass, it hasn't updated. It doesn't matter if you hit hot reload or on save, these changes won't take effect until you stop, rebuild, and then run it again. So that's one nuance that you will have to be aware about. The other thing is when you are in the project file, we did talk about the options there for the Dart Sass output style. So when you install it, these options won't be in there, but you can take them verbatim from the repo out on GitHub. And compressed is the default style when you transpile to CSS. However, you can have this condition here that if it's debug, you want it expanded. So now when I build and debug, you get this expanded instead of compressed, and that might help with debugging and looking at the files once launched in the browser. All right, so just in a matter of minutes, we were able to get Sass set up and configured in our Blazor application. Now just remember, a lot of the examples out there are 100 level and they include using just plain CSS. But if you're going to be building a first class application with Blazor components, you're going to want to leverage a preprocessor that leans on Sass or less to build those excellent top tier components. Hopefully you found this video useful. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Check out the other content on the channel. And until next time, this is the Eclectic Dev. We'll see you later.